This is just insane. Russians in the occupied territories are drugging Ukrainian children with psychotropics for disobedience. The Ukrainian armed forces are advancing on Berdyansk. Ukraine has broken through the front in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Feodosia is on fire. A massive missile attack on Crimea. Medvedev threatens Trump over the transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Russia is attacking Poland. Warsaw has made a statement. Mass desertion has begun in the Russian army. 50,000 soldiers have left the battlefield. Hello, my name is Yulia Kokan, and right now here are the main stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. Russia has abducted at least 19,000 Ukrainian children, and another 1,700 are still in Russia and are generally considered missing in Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this in an interview with Fox News. He noted that at present, there is precise data on the abduction of this number of young Ukrainians. However, this number could be higher. To search for and return Ukrainian children home, there is an international program called Bring Kids Back, which 40 countries have joined.
We know that at least 19,000 children have been abducted by Russia. It could be more, but 19,000 is confirmed. 1,600 have already been returned to Ukraine.
The horrors on the territories temporarily occupied by Russia continue. Ukrainian children there are unable to study according to the Ukrainian curriculum because they or their parents could be punished for it. In some cases, Russian occupiers isolate children and forcibly administer psychotropic drugs to them for disobedience. Daria Herasimchuk, advisor to the President's Commissioner for Children's Rights and Child Rehabilitation, spoke about this in an interview with Interfax Ukraine. According to her, children are forbidden to speak Ukrainian or study Ukrainian literature. For even the slightest display of their national identity, they may unfortunately be subjected to severe physical violence, prolonged isolation, or even forced medication.
It is truly very difficult for children in such conditions. They are not allowed to speak Ukrainian, let alone study the Ukrainian language and literature. They know that they themselves can be punished for this, or their parents may suffer. Often, for such disobedience, children are beaten, isolated, or forcibly given psychotropic drugs. I personally know of such cases.
But that's not all. According to Herasimchuk, children from the occupied territories have no way to report violations of their rights because the occupiers. However, if a child has access to the internet, they can reach out to the Children of War portal and share what they've experienced. This allows the Ukrainian side to document crimes and provide assistance. Russia is a terrorist state and will definitely be held accountable for every one of its actions. Like if you agree. I read the comments under previous episodes and see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Write in the comments under this episode which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And now let's continue. Things are about to get even more interesting. There is good news from the front. According to the General Staff, the defense forces have advanced 3.5 kilometers in the Orikhiv direction in Zaporizhzhia. The occupiers continue to be destroyed.
As a result of a joint operation by the fighters of the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment and the 24th Separate Assault Battalion Ada, the settlement of Mali-Sherbaki is now under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine.
So things are going badly for the Russians in the south. In short, here is a comment from one of the Russian fighters.
It's a terrible situation. Well, that's it. Greetings to the kids.
In the past 24 hours, 1,140 occupiers have turned into fertilizer, and a total of 136 units of enemy military equipment have been destroyed. But gradually, tensions are rising in the Seversk direction. There, according to a soldier with the call sign Mukhnoi, the enemy is preparing a foothold for a new offensive.
The enemy is deliberately preparing a foothold for a future assault on Zvanivka. For several days in a row now, there has been active enemy artillery and FPV drone fire targeting the private sector in the southern part of the settlement.
In the Dobropilya direction, the situation remains consistently difficult. There is constant reinforcement from the Russian side there. The old ones are driven out, new ones come in. Kostiantynivka is already deserted, the terror is intensifying, and the city is constantly under fire. The hottest situation right now is in the Pokrovsk direction. There, the defenders repelled 46 attacks. The Russians also tried to advance in the Oleksandrivka, North Slobozhansk, South Slobozhansk, Kupiansk, Lyman, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and Kostiantynivka directions. In these directions, the total number of engagements was 88. But the Ukrainian armed forces managed to carry out counteroffensive actions in the Donetsk region, pushing back Russian troops near the settlements of Novaya Shakova, Zolotoy Kolodets, Kucheryov Yar, and Novopavlovka. Moreover, the Russians don't let our people sleep even in the temporarily occupied territories. Not again, but once more. An oil depot was attacked in Feodosia. Several substations were also damaged there. This was the work of SBU and SSO drones.
Is that the oil depot?
Yes, there might be another explosion. It looks like it's at the oil depot again. It's all on fire right now. I think there are 6 or 7 spots burning.
I think it's even more. Well, it's just more to the left. More details about what's happening on the front lines around it at this very moment are in our report.
Russia has intensified assaults on almost all fronts. Mechanized columns have been deployed again, and once more enemy equipment was destroyed. How partisan intelligence helped repel a massive offensive near Vovchansk? Enemy equipment has been destroyed near Dobropilya, and there is a critical situation with Russian mobilization. Find out what life is like on the front today, right now. The Russian army is attacking along the entire front line but is making almost no progress anywhere. This is reported by the Institute for the Study of War. The next Russian General Staff offensive is planned in particular in the Kharkiv region. Near Vovchansk, the enemy had amassed enough forces for a breakthrough but lost even before the offensive began. Partisans from report that their agent from the 82nd Motorized Rifle Regiment was able to transmit the exact coordinates of Russian artillery positions, armored vehicles, and locations where the occupiers were stationed. As a result, Ukraine's defense forces were able to prepare in advance for possible offensive actions and strike back at the enemy. As a result of the effective work of the Ukrainian military, the Russians' plan collapsed before it even began.
Taking advantage of the weather conditions, uncomfortable weather, the lack, for example, of the usual intensity of our drones' operations, because the birds simply either won't be able to see or won't be able to take off, the enemy will try to carry out more active assault actions. In fact, this includes the use of mechanized components, which we are already observing today in certain areas of the front.
At the same time, the situation remains tense in the area around the city of Kupiansk. There too, our military is observing an enemy buildup as they repeatedly try to increase their presence in the settlement. However, despite constant attempts to launch new assaults, Russia has made no advances in this direction.
Unfortunately, the enemy has managed to reach the outskirts of the city. You know that fighting continues there in the northwestern and northern parts of the city. The enemy is also trying to infiltrate the central part of Kupiansk with sabotage and reconnaissance groups. The situation is very difficult. Their goal is clear: to break into open terrain and try to advance further through Kharkiv region. The attempt to seize the city, the attempt to control Kupiansk as a key hub, is also about logistics. In other words, it's an attempt to cut off our logistics and create unfavorable conditions for those troop groupings located at this part of the front and in neighboring areas.
The Dobropilya direction is probably the hottest spot on the front today. In the past 24 hours, intense fighting has broken out there for the settlement of Vladimirovka. It is from there that the Russians are trying to break through to their forces who remain encircled here.
An additional problem was the landing of paratroopers deep state adds. The Russians brought between 50 and 75 infantrymen into the village. The situation remains difficult. The Russian armed forces will try to take maximum advantage of the worsening weather conditions, analysts warn. Later, the 1st Corps of the Azov National Guard reported that they had managed to hold Vladimirovka.
According to the Corps statement, the Russians launched their offensive with 35 units of heavy armored vehicles, tanks, and armored fighting vehicles. As a result of defensive actions, 1 armored tractor, 3 tanks, and 16 enemy armored fighting vehicles were destroyed or damaged. The Russians also lost 41 motorcycles and 2 light vehicles. Near the neighboring town of Pokrovsk, Russian forces also decided to build up their presence. A group of infantry on motorcycles was sent to break through. As a result, 13 motorcyclists were taken out and there was no advance. Here's another epic video from Donetsk region, Ukrainian drones versus Russian tanks. The Ukrainian armed forces showed how our troops destroyed half a dozen enemy tanks and a Grad multiple rocket launcher system. The video was published by the UAV forces of the Ukrainian armed forces. Thus, in the Donetsk direction, operators of the 427th Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment Ararok halted the enemy's assault actions by knocking out 5 tanks at once, depriving the infantry groups of cover and making further advance impossible, according to the report. In addition, the military delivered an effective strike on a BM-21 Grad multiple rocket launcher system, when the enemy was firing at the positions of the Ukrainian army. According to the command, the defense forces have now managed to gain a tactical advantage in this sector. At the same time, our military is operating not only along the front line but also in the rear of the Russian grouping. For example, in occupied Donetsk, a large-scale fire broke out after drone strikes.
Natalia, this is fucked up.
According to locals, plumes of black smoke could be seen from anywhere in the city. It is known that the site hit was the former Ocean hypermarket near the Sloviansk-Donetsk-Mariupol bypass road. However, residents reported online that after the strikes, they clearly heard further detonations. The night before, a cluster of military vehicles was seen near the store. It is known that as a result of the fire, the building's roof collapsed and the premises were completely burned out.
Looks like it's flaring up.
Meanwhile, in Russia, against the backdrop of failures at the front, the pace of mobilization has sharply declined. Recruitment into the ranks of the occupiers has dropped almost threefold, which is already being felt by units at the front, said Ivan Timochka, head of the Council of Reservists of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to him, Russia is trying to solve this problem in several ways. In particular, they have passed a bill in the first reading that allows for conscription mobilization throughout the year. Timochka says that Russia may use conscripts, including in the war against Ukraine.
In the last 2 quarters, they have been recruiting 30,000 to 35,000 per quarter, not even per month. Whereas previously this number was recruited in a month, now it takes 3 months. So now they are recruiting 10,000 to 12,000 per month.
At the same time, military analysts note that in the Russian information space, they no longer even try to hide the prospects facing newly mobilized soldiers, openly stating that, on average, they are expected to live less than 2 weeks after signing the contract.
The mayor of the city of Strizhevoy in the Tomsk region has reached a new level of candor. He honestly said that new contract soldiers are needed to replace those who have been killed and wounded. According to the head of the city, on Friday he recruits new people, and on Monday he buries the old ones. War correspondent Romanov gave a more detailed explanation of why people are constantly needed at the front. The life expectancy of an assault soldier is 12 days. That's from signing the contract, training at the range, and the assault itself. Usually in the singular, the assault.
And this statistic is relentlessly confirmed by the Ukrainian armed forces. According to the General Staff, in the past 24 hours alone, the occupiers have lost more than 1,200 of their soldiers. In total, Russian losses have exceeded 1,122,000 people.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian warriors. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the Ukrainian armed forces, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us. US President Donald Trump stated that the United States may provide Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles if Russia does not stop the war in Ukraine in the near future. But before making such a decision, the UN first wants to discuss it with Putin. The possible transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine was immediately met with a reaction from Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, who threatened both Ukraine and Trump.
Trump said that if the Russian president does not resolve the Ukrainian conflict, it will end badly for him. He's threatening for the 101st time, basically. If the business peacemaker is talking about Tomahawks, then the statement is incorrect. The delivery of these missiles could end badly for everyone, and above all, for Trump himself. It has been said 100 times in terms even a star-spangled uncle can understand that it's impossible to distinguish a nuclear Tomahawk from a conventional one in flight. Let it not be Banderite Kiev carrying them out, but the USA itself. Red Trump. How should Russia respond? Exactly. One can only hope that this is just another empty threat caused by protracted negotiations with the cocaine-fueled clown, like sending nuclear submarines closer to Russia. Well, you know how these things go. A submarine surfaced in the steppes of Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that if Ukraine receives Tomahawk cruise missiles from the US, strikes will be carried out exclusively against military targets on Russian territory. Such targets could include oil refineries, since Russia uses revenue from energy resources to finance the war. Well, ladies and gentlemen, place your bets on when the Tomahawks will arrive in Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
A Ukrainian woman faced a wave of xenophobia in Poland after becoming a contender for the title of Warsaw Woman of the Year. This was reported by a local Polish newspaper. The Warsaw Woman of the Year plebiscite has been honoring women for over a century who shape the city, contribute to its development, promote openness, and serve as role models for all residents through their work. This year, among the 9 nominated women was 19-year-old Kira Sukoboychenko from Yevpatoria. Her candidacy sparked a wave of criticism, even though the contest rules do not stipulate that only ethnic Poles or those born in the capital can receive the title. Any woman whose work serves the city can be named Warsaw Woman of the Year. Sukoboychenko moved to Warsaw at the age of 8, completed her education, and began her activist work. Today she is the coordinator of the Center for Integration and Adaptation for Ukrainians and Poles in Warsaw. As the newspaper reports, under the news about Sukoboychenko's nomination on the official page of the city authorities, almost 5,000 comments were left, most of which were xenophobic in nature. Commenters discussed her right to compete for the title because of her nationality. Is she a Warsaw woman or a Ukrainian? She's as much a Warsaw woman as I am Chinese. There were also suggestions that her nomination was the result of imposed political correctness, as well as calls to boycott the vote. And what do you think about this story? Write your thoughts, don't hold back in the comments. Russia has tripled its cyber attacks on Poland. The energy and water supply sectors are under attack. In the first 3 quarters of 2025, 170,000 cyber incidents were recorded, a significant portion of which are linked to the activities of Russian cyber criminals. Reuters reports this, citing the Minister of Digital Affairs, Krzysztof Gałkowski. According to the minister, Poland was subjected to up to 4,000 attacks daily, of which about 1,000 posed a real threat to the functioning of government systems. The energy sector, water supply, and sewage systems came under attack. The most powerful cyber attack occurred on September 10th, on the night when Russian drones violated Polish airspace.
Russian cyber activity poses a significant threat as its operations specifically target critical infrastructure that is absolutely vital for maintaining essential normal life and societal well-being.
Who better than us to know what Russia is capable of? I'm sure Poland won't be the last to experience such attacks. At least 50,000 Russian soldiers have deserted the army during the large-scale war against Ukraine. This information became known due to a leak of documents from the Russian Ministry of Defense. The real numbers, of course, are higher, and that's not surprising since horrific crimes and violations of the rights of their own soldiers and their families occur in Putin's army. The occupiers themselves talk about this, and not just the prisoners. See for yourself.
I know about many violations. It's like they erased people. I know of cases, I know where the bodies are buried. That's how it is. And specifically, an order came down about me, to erase me, so that I wouldn't leave the combat position alive.
This convict occupier deserted his post after an order was given not to let him leave the position alive. He left together with another soldier who had received a similar order. That was the only way to stay alive.
I was beaten up right after I first left for Sochi. They caught me and beat me very brutally with a bucket and a stick. They threw me into a pit. From the pit, I was sent on a combat mission in handcuffs.
What has happened to these occupiers now is unknown, but the video was posted in public groups as their final messages before death.
The guys really ran away because it's extremely hard to get out of there alive.
And here is the wife of Ivan, an occupier and Russian soldier, who was initially labeled as a Sochi deserter. He refused to go on a mission after spending 2 days evacuating a fellow soldier from the front line. After that, he was ordered to go out with other soldiers to monitor the troops so they wouldn't flee their positions. Ivan himself complained that many refused to follow orders and desert.
The guys just can't get through any further. Today I sent out a group of 4 people, 6 people. Only 3 came back. Here they are sitting and crying, saying, "We're scared, we won't go, we don't want to die," and so on. They can't make it through here in the open. I'm just sitting here myself now. I say, I just don't want to push anyone.
In the end, Ivan was eliminated. As for the draft dodgers, their number in the Russian army is only growing. After all, they're treated like cannon fodder, and many choose to live free, even if it means being on the run.
Well, I mean, I'm really actually a saboteur. By specialty, we are now down to just 6 of us remaining. There used to be a much larger number, specifically 70 individuals. Now only 6 remain. There is a lifeline here from Bakhmut to Chasiv Yar. It's so hard to get through it. You drive over corpses, there's no road. The van just goes like this. You can literally tell who we're driving over.
Even Russian soldiers themselves say that the reason for such huge losses is, in particular, lack of preparation.
They recruit people who don't know how to do anything. Millions are spent on their training.
They arrive and right away they're thrown back into the Soviet Union.
There's another option, to surrender. But the Russian command has made a lot of effort to intimidate their subordinates. For example, they vividly describe supposed torture in Ukrainian captivity.
They say they foam up your ass, cut off your balls. Well, that's actually what made me afraid to go too.
And things like that.
They rarely go for the balls, of course, but the foam thing is constant. When I crossed, I asked, "Guys, you're not gonna foam me, right?" They replied, "What foam?" I responded, "That's what they tell us." They said, "Don't worry, they fed us, gave us drinks, treated us well."
That's why the occupiers choose what, from their point of view, is the only option, to leave their posts without permission. According to leaked documents from the Russian Ministry of Defense, since the start of the so-called special military operation, about 50,000 people have deserted the Russian army. And that's just the official number. In reality, the situation is much worse. But even if you just look at the documents, you can see the trend is getting worse. In recent months, the number of cases of unauthorized absence has increased. For example, in Grozny, there are now 17% more such cases than a year ago. And it's highly doubtful that the situation will improve for Putin's army.
China has called on the US to stop its pressure over increased tariffs and warned that it will take retaliatory measures if Washington continues its restrictive actions. Bloomberg reports this. At the same time, it is reported that Beijing emphasized the need to return to negotiations to resolve trade disputes. US President Donald Trump announced that, starting November 1st, additional 100% tariffs will be imposed on Chinese goods, along with restrictions on the export of critically important software. This was a response to China's actions, new port fees for American ships, an antitrust investigation, and restrictions on the export of rare earth metals and strategic materials. China explained that their measures are defensive in nature and were a response to new American restrictions following the September talks in Madrid. Beijing believes that constant threats of high tariffs are not the right way to interact with China and has promised to protect the country's legitimate interests. Beijing noted that US measures against maritime, logistics, and shipbuilding companies are damaging bilateral relations. Russian military personnel, the so-called Little Green Men, have been spotted near the Russian border with Estonia. Let us recall that this is exactly how, in 2014, the Russian army began the seizure of Crimea. What is the current threat to Estonia and the entire Baltic region? What is the Kremlin dictator planning? Is he really going to attack again? We have gathered facts and opinions.
Putin's Little Green Men are already at Estonia's doorstep. It seems the bunker dweller is preparing a Crimea 2.0 operation in Europe. Western media are publishing footage in which armed men can be seen on the road. Judging by their uniforms, it's clear these are definitely not Russian border guards. Due to the sudden activation of unidentified Russian troops in the areas of checkpoints between Russia and Estonia, the police department has urgently closed the country's eastern borders. We decided to close the road to prevent possible provocations and incidents. Our main goal is the safety of the Estonian population. Gunter Pedosk, operational head of the southern prefecture. The safety of their own population is the top priority for all Baltic countries. For example, today Latvia is expelling at least 841 Russian citizens from the country. These are Russians who were unable to prove even a basic knowledge of the Latvian language. The EU country no longer wants to see the Kremlin's fifth column on its territory.
The stay of such Russians in Latvia will be considered illegal, and their access to social services will be closed. If the Russians remain, they will face deportation. Madara Puk, representative of the Latvian Office of Citizenship and Migration Affairs.
Due to the possible Russian attack on NATO, the alliance is preparing to evacuate 1.2 million people. According to the authorities of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, this is the number of citizens who would need to flee from war in the event of aggression from the Kremlin. This concerns at least a 40-kilometer strip along the borders with Russia and Belarus. For Lithuania, this would mean a total evacuation. In that case, even the capital would fall into the potential frontline zone. However, in Vilnius, they are confident that such a scenario is unlikely.
An emergency of such scale, which would require evacuating Vilnius entirely, is unlikely to develop in just one day. That is, it may well be necessary to start with some localized evacuations of the eastern outskirts of the city or even individual neighborhoods. But we proceed from the assumption that ultimately our resources must be prepared for the evacuation of all 600,000 residents of Vilnius.
Meanwhile, in Estonia, which has closed its borders, local churches, schools, universities and sports arenas are already actively preparing to receive internally displaced persons. Special transportation, trains and buses are being allocated for this purpose. Residents are being assigned to potential evacuation points and given maps and information about the evacuation routes. Europeans themselves are stocking up on provisions, first aid kits and packing emergency bags in case they need to flee suddenly.
People have been talking about this for a long time, for the past several weeks, even months. At work, everywhere. We'll see how things turn out. For now, we need to take care of the most urgent things.
In total, the population of the Baltic countries exceeds 6 million people. Of these, almost 2.9 million live in Lithuania, nearly 2 million in Latvia, and 1.4 million people in Estonia. In Vilnius, evacuation plans are being prepared for about a quarter of the population, in Latvia for a third, and in Estonia for 10%. And that's taking into account the most optimistic forecasts. According to military analysts, if Putin launches a full-scale offensive against the Baltic countries, every single resident there could become a displaced person.
They have platforms for various types of missile weaponry, which can strike in the shortest possible time. As one of our sources told us, these systems can literally be rolled out of garages, for example, at the Luga military base, 100 kilometers from the Estonian border, loaded with Iskander missiles in 5 minutes and launched in quantities that would cover the entire territory of Estonia and most of Latvia.
Meanwhile, Russian propaganda is foaming at the mouth, insisting that the Kremlin's intentions are purely peaceful and that the Baltic countries supposedly have nothing to fear. Even the bunker dweller himself, putting on an innocent face, tries to reassure the West.
We ourselves have never initiated military confrontation. It is pointless, unnecessary, just unnecessary, and simply absurd. They can't possibly believe this. They can't possibly believe what they're saying, that Russia is planning to attack NATO. So it's impossible to believe this nonsense.
In much the same way, right before February 2022, Moscow was insisting they had no intention of invading Ukraine. Earlier, in 2014, Putin also denied the involvement of Russian army soldiers in the annexation of Crimea. So it's no surprise, as soon as the little green men appeared, the Baltic countries began preparing for the worst.
The nature of hybrid warfare is such that you might not realize, is this already a war, a single attack, or just an accident? The same goes for the damaged communication cables in the Baltic Sea or the plane that recently crashed in Lithuania. An attack or an accident? Not to mention the constant problems with the GPS signal in the area of the Suwałki corridor.
And to make matters worse at NATO's border, Putin's loyal friend Alexander Lukashenko is actively adding fuel to the fire. The latter has resorted to yet another dirty provocation. He suddenly put the troops in Belarus on alert. the country's Ministry of Defense cheerfully reported that units are already moving out to certain areas to carry out the tasks assigned by the Batka.
The armed forces units involved in the combat readiness check are moving to their designated areas.
However, analysts insist that all this is more for show than actual preparation for a real invasion. Belarus will continue to constantly escalate the situation and threaten with combat readiness checks. As for the Russian army, it is so bogged down in the war in Ukraine that the Kremlin simply doesn't have the strength to open a second front. Nevertheless, everything could change quickly.
Recruiting new soldiers takes quite a long time, but in principle, this is probably a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. Something like that. Because there are quite capable units on the front in Ukraine. So all that's needed is to simply transfer them. That won't take much time. And then arm them, reorganize them somehow.
Among experts, there is an opinion that Russia is already preparing for war with NATO and may strike earlier than intelligence agencies expect. For example, the American Institute for the Study of War claims that Moscow has entered the so-called Phase 0 in preparing for a confrontation with the alliance. Russia is creating reserves and developing new tactics for waging war without the mass use of armored vehicles, and is capable of launching new aggression without waiting for the full restoration of its army after the war with Ukraine. Whether Putin will chicken out or actually attack the Baltic countries, we will find out very soon.
The self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, is once again dragging Belarus back into the past under Moscow's imperial yoke. Thus, at the meeting of the CIS heads of State Council in Dushanbe, he stated that it is no longer possible to restore the Soviet Union, but the economic space must be preserved.
I'm not urging anyone to restore the Soviet Union. That's impossible today. But the economic space needs to be preserved.
Behind this rhetoric is not concern for the economy, but an attempt to revive the corpse of the empire, with the Kremlin once again at the center. While the world moves forward, Lukashenko continues to live in the past. In a world where the Union never collapsed, and Belarus remains an appendage of its big brother. But that's not all. Now, every new trip by the Belarusian dictator is accompanied not only by security, but also by careful video editing. Lukashenko's press service is increasingly cutting out the moments where he descends from the airplane stairs. For example, during his arrival in Dushanbe on October 9th, the camera showed the plane touched down on the runway and then immediately cut to a shot where Lukashenko was already standing at the bottom. No movement, no steps, just a ready-made image of a smiling leader. The reason seems simple. Even a few steps are difficult for 71-year-old Lukashenko. Instead of walking, there's a VIP-labeled electric cart that drives him even to informal dinners for heads of state. It seems that Lukashenko, who for decades played the role of a strongman, can now barely stand on his feet, and his press service is doing everything possible so the country doesn't notice. How do you like our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you